Welcome back to the Monimate Podcast. If this show has been shifting how you think about money and stability, please take a second to subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs it. We genuinely appreciate every single one of you who keeps coming back. Now, Marcus, I have to say this up front. This episode feels different to me. We have spent this entire season dismantling financial illusions, irregular income, compression, recovery windows, architecture. But if I am honest, Runway feels like the foundation underneath all of it. Because without Runway, none of the other layers actually hold.
That is exactly right, and I am glad you said it first because now I do not have to sound dramatic saying it. Runway is the base layer. Everything else we have talked about, recovery speed, compression tolerance, architectural stability, emotional calm, all of it sits on top of Runway. And most people do not even know their number.
Which is the part that gets me every time. It is not that people have bad runway. It is that they have never calculated it. They are operating on a feeling instead of a number.
And feelings are notoriously unreliable financial instruments.
Deeply unreliable. So let's ask the question clearly, because it is the question this entire episode is built around. If your income stopped today, not forever, just paused, how many calm days do you have?
That question changes posture immediately. And I want to be precise about the word calm, because it is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Not hopeful days, not I will figure something out days, not days where you are technically surviving but mentally spiraling. Calm days. Days where every essential obligation can be met without stress, without scrambling, without borrowing from the future. That is Runway. And that is what real stability actually looks like.
Let's talk about why time matters more than totals. Because this is the reframe that I think unlocks everything.
Because pressure is time-bound. That is the core of it. Obligations do not wait for annual averages. Rent drafts on a specific date. Payroll hits on a specific date. Insurance clears on a specific date. Minimum debt payments fall on specific dates. The calendar does not care what you earned last year or what you expect to earn next quarter. It only cares what is in the account when the date arrives.
And if liquidity runs out before income resumes, pressure forms. It does not matter how strong the year looked on paper.
Stability is the distance between liquidity exhaustion and income arrival. That distance is measured in time. Not in income labels, not in net worth, not in how impressive the annual total looks. Time.
So by that logic, someone earning $200,000 a year could be structurally more fragile than someone earning $80,000.
Absolutely. And this is not a hypothetical. This is the reality for a significant portion of high earners. Income momentum is not structural protection. If the high earner has high fixed exposure, a lifestyle anchored to peak months, and thin, accessible liquidity, their runway might be 3 weeks. The moderate earner, with disciplined liquidity staging and a lean obligation structure, might have 4 months. Stability is not about income size. It is about reserve depth relative to essential obligations.
That is the illusion so many people live inside. They have built their entire sense of financial safety on income, on the assumption that the money will keep coming.
Income creates confidence. Liquidity creates stability. Those are different things. And when people anchor their sense of safety to income alone, they are essentially betting that nothing will interrupt the flow, which is a bet that eventually loses.
And fragility only becomes visible when momentum slows.
Exactly. A delayed client payment. A bonus that comes in 30% lighter than expected. A slow quarter. A health issue that pulls you offline for 6 weeks. When income pauses, even briefly, thin runway becomes visible immediately. And then, everything that felt stable suddenly feels very fragile.
And that is when anxiety spikes. Not because the person made terrible decisions, but because the structure was never built to absorb a pause.
Right. The anxiety is appropriate. It is a correct read of the situation. The problem is not the feeling. The problem is the exposure that created the feeling.
Let's define runway precisely, because I want to make sure no one walks away from this episode with a fuzzy sense of what we mean.
Runway equals accessible liquid funds divided by essential monthly obligations. And both of those words, accessible and essential, are doing important work. Essential means stripped to survival baseline: housing, utilities, insurance, minimum debt payments, core food, fixed business operating costs if you run a business. Not lifestyle upgrades, not subscriptions you could cancel, not aspirational spending. The floor, what it costs to keep your life structurally intact.
And accessible means actually liquid, right now, no friction.
Correct. And this is where people often inflate their runway number without realizing it. Retirement accounts are not runway. Home equity is not runway. Invested capital is not runway. That money exists and it matters, but it is not immediately deployable for stabilization without cost, delay, or penalty. Runway must be cash or near cash that you can access today if you needed to. And it must be separated from growth money, both financially and psychologically. Because if you are mentally counting your investment portfolio as part of your safety net, you are going to hesitate to use it when you actually need it.
Which defeats the entire purpose of having it.
Completely. So let's make it concrete. If someone has $12,000 in accessible liquidity and their essential monthly obligations are $4,000, they have 3 months of runway.
3 months. And 3 months feels very different from 3 weeks. Physiologically, psychologically, the nervous system responds to time, not to income labels.
3 weeks of runway means any disruption is an emergency. 3 months means disruptions are manageable. 6 months means they are inconvenient. 12 months means they are almost irrelevant to your daily sense of stability.
That progression is remarkable when you say it out loud. The same person, the same income, just a different depth of accessible reserve, and a completely different internal experience of financial life. Talk to me about what actually changes as runway deepens, because I think people hear this and they think it is just about feeling safer. But you are saying it goes further than that.
Much further, decision quality improves. That is the big one. Short runway compresses cognition. When survival pressure is immediate, the brain narrows its focus. It increases urgency bias. You over-accept work you should decline. You under-negotiate terms because you cannot afford for the deal to fall through. You delay strategic investments that would pay off in 6 months because you need the cash today. You react instead of design. You operate from fear instead of intention.
And you tolerate things you should not tolerate.
Yes. Short runway makes you tolerant of bad situations because the alternative feels worse. Long runway expands cognition. It restores executive bandwidth. It allows long-term thinking. It gives you the ability to say no to something that does not serve you because you know you can afford to wait for something better.
So runway is not just safety, it is leverage.
It is leverage. It changes how you negotiate every single thing. What you charge, what you accept, what you walk away from, whether you act from scarcity or from position. Deep runway is one of the most powerful business and career tools that almost nobody talks about in those terms.
Because it does not feel like a strategy. It feels like savings.
Right. Nobody writes the LinkedIn post about, I built 6 months of runway and it changed my negotiating posture. But they should.
Someone should. And it connects directly back to recovery windows. If runway is thin when a pressure event hits, recovery drags because there is nothing to recover with.
Yes. Recovery speed is tied directly to reserve depth. If a pressure event depletes what little liquidity you had and the reserve is shallow, the recovery window extends. And extended recovery windows erode resilience over time. Over years, that pattern creates chronic low-level stress that becomes the background radiation of your financial life. You stop noticing it because it is always there, but it is always costing you something.
That is architectural, not emotional.
Stability is always architectural. Emotional calm without structural depth is temporary. It is borrowed calm. And eventually, the loan comes due.
Now, let's talk about high earners specifically, because this is the group that I think is most surprised when they calculate their runway and find out it is thinner than they expected.
Because strong income can mask weak architecture for a very long time. When revenue flows consistently, thin runway does not feel dangerous. You keep making the payments, things keep working. The number in the account at any given moment feels fine. But if obligations are anchored to peak months instead of a reliable baseline, the exposure is silently growing. And when income slows, for any reason, the imbalance becomes visible all at once.
So expansion without reserve is just exposure wearing a nice suit.
That is a great line. Yes, revenue growth without liquidity growth increases fragility. The system gets bigger and more expensive to maintain, but it does not get safer. And bigger fragile systems fail harder than smaller fragile systems.
What about people with a regular income? Freelancers, business owners, commission-based earners. For them, Runway is not just a nice to have.
For irregular income earners, runway is oxygen. That is not hyperbole. Income variability without runway creates chronic stress because every slow month is an emergency. Income variability with adequate runway becomes manageable fluctuation. The income is the same, the volatility is the same, the difference is entirely in the liquidity staging.
Liquidity staging. Let's spend a moment here because I think people hear staging and think it is complicated.
It is not complicated. It is just intentional. You do not save randomly and hope for the best. You build layers with purpose. Survival runway first, 1 to 3 months of essential obligations protected, untouchable except for genuine emergencies. Recovery runway second, an additional buffer that covers extended disruptions, gives you time to pivot without panic. Expansion capital third, money that is working, growing, building. Each layer has a different job. Keeping them separated prevents the illusion that you have more safety than you do.
And the illusion of safety is genuinely dangerous.
More dangerous than visible instability, because when instability is visible, you correct it. When it is hidden behind a large investment account or a strong income year, you do not. And then something happens that you were not structurally prepared for, and it hits much harder than it should have.
Let's get practical. Someone is listening to this right now. They calculate their runway. It is thinner than they expected. Maybe it is 3 weeks. Maybe it is 6 weeks. What do they do first?
First, do not spiral. Seriously, a thin runway number is not a verdict. It is a measurement. And measurements allow action in a way that vague anxiety does not.
Information, not shame.
Exactly. Then, secure 1 month of essential runway. That is the first milestone. Find it. Protect it. Open a separate account if you need to. Name it something that reminds you what it is for. Do not touch it for discretionary spending. That single month changes something real about how you move through the world. Then extend to 2. Then 3. 3 months of runway significantly reduces chronic financial stress for most people. 6 months changes posture. 12 months changes identity.
Identity is a strong word. Tell me more about that.
When you know, structurally, not just emotionally, that you can operate calmly for a year without new income, something fundamental shifts. You are no longer living in survival proximity. Survival pressure is no longer immediate, and when survival pressure drops, clarity rises. You think differently. You negotiate differently. You tolerate less of what does not serve you. You take on more of what does. The person you are with 12 months of Runway is genuinely different from the person you are with 3 weeks.
That is true. I have seen it. Once you have felt that depth of stability, you understand why everything else we have talked about this season matters. Because the goal was never just to survive the tight weeks. The goal was always this: calm days. Real ones.
And the beautiful thing is that it is reachable. It does not require a windfall. It does not require a record year. It requires intention, staging, and time, which is less exciting than a financial hack, but considerably more reliable.
Considerably. Let's end where we started. If income paused today, how many calm days do you have? That is the question. And we want to ask it one more time because it deserves to land.
Calculate it. Do not guess emotionally. Do not round up to make yourself feel better. Measure it structurally. Accessible liquid funds divided by essential monthly obligations. That number is your real stability. Not your income, not your net worth, not your strongest quarter, your runway.
And if the number is smaller than you would like?
That is not shame. That is information. And information allows redesign. The number is not fixed. It is a starting point. Every intentional financial decision you make from here moves it in the right direction.
Next week is our season finale, and I have been looking forward to it because we bring everything together. Income architecture, compression, recovery windows, runway, all of it integrated into one system. And we will be joined by Divine Ahis, founder and CEO of Monimate Technologies, for a conversation that zooms all the way out. System level, vision level, the thinking behind why this show exists and where it is going.
Because stability is not about earning more. It is about designing systems that absorb shock before it becomes crisis. And that is what we have been building toward all season.
Subscribe so you do not miss it. Share this episode with someone whose runway you suspect is thinner than it should be. They may not say thank you immediately, but they will. This is the Monimate Podcast, personal financial stability intelligence, built on trust, powered by intelligence. See pressure early, stay in control. I am Hope.
And I am Marcus. See you next week.